Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday meditation gathering. I'm so glad you're all here to share this time together. Meditation gathers energy when we meditate together. This week we have Keith Kavanagh who will lead us in meditation, and then we'll have 20 minutes of silence. After that, we'll open it up for sharing and we end at 10:45. Over to you, Keith.
Thanks, Dan. Like I said before we started the recording, it's always a pleasure to be with this group. And I'm really pleased to be back with you this morning. The last time I was here, I introduced an idea for the group to consider, and it would be this idea of being either above the battleground with Jesus or being in the cinema with Jesus. And this is a really helpful metaphor. I guess Jesus originated the being above the battleground, and Ken Wapnick originated the being in the cinema or the theater with Jesus. And the idea behind this is that we have a wrong mind and we have a right mind. And they are always present, but they are dissociated from each other. And so what we want to do in the course is we want to bring the darkness to the light. We want to bring our wrong mind to our right mind. And this is the technique that does that. Today, what I'd like to do is maybe bring us beyond the metaphor and into an experience. And I think it's important to graduate beyond the metaphor, because oftentimes we can get very stuck on, am I visualizing Jesus properly? Am I visualizing the cinema? So I want to just sort of short circuit those concerns and hopefully take you beyond those pitfalls with the practice today. Really, the metaphor is a training wheels, and we want to try and take those off then. So let's see if we can do that. This was, Ken has such an amazing body of work, and I know it can seem overwhelming and people can think it's overly complex because he literally explains everything the course says. And the course is very complex. People like to think it's not. The course is very complex because the ego is very complex, and he spends half the course talking about the circuitous routes of the ego. However, the practice can always put forwards this idea of being in the theater with Jesus is incredibly simple. And we want to just try and sort of drill into it today and really understand what it means. Ken would say that one of the things that, really started me on my practice was hearing Ken say that your daily practice would be going about your day normally, getting up, eating your breakfast, getting dressed, going to work, spending your day in work, commuting home, family time when you get in, brushing your teeth before bed and going to bed. So, he always said that, you be normal in the world. But the idea that really struck me when he said it was, but you are all the time with Jesus in your mind, knowing the whole thing is made up. So you live your life as normal from the part of you that knows you're not really there. So we're undoing the mindlessness the ego chose by making a world and projecting into it. We're choosing to be mindful. Now, this idea of the you that can look at the world and indeed your thoughts and feelings happening, and see these as objects of attention and not what you are, that's the you that's always in the cinema with Jesus. Because like we said, the wrong mind and the right mind are always present. They're just dissociated. Jesus says in the course, enlightenment is but a recognition. It's not a change at all. Those who seek the light are covering their eyes. Awareness is always present in your mind, but you're not aware of it. You're always noticing the world, and you're noticing how the world is making you think, your wrong mind, and how it's making your feelings, what it's doing inside of you. You know, the world comes in and there's an inner experience as a result of it. And you're always aware of what's happening. You're always noticing it, but you're not noticing the noticer. And that's the experience, not the visualization, of being with Jesus. That's the experience of being outside of space and time, looking at a movie. The other pitfall when it comes to being in the cinema with Jesus is to think that it's this me, this thinking and feeling body that's in the cinema with Jesus. And that's not it. That's what's on the screen. That's the movie character. That's all made up. Jesus tells us in all the early lessons, your thoughts are not your real thoughts, not the good ones and not the bad ones. That's the self you made. That's not the Son of God. The self that can attack and be attacked, that you made up. Jesus wants us to realize that self is completely made up. Not by fighting it, not by shouting it down, not by stifling it, nothing like that. All he asks is, let me look at it with you. Let me look at that self you made, all those thoughts and feelings going on inside of you. I think one of the most helpful explanations of this process in the course is from chapter 14, section 7, paragraph 6. The Holy Spirit asks of you but this: bring him every secret you have locked away from him. Open every door to him and bid him enter the darkness and lighten it away. At your request, he enters gladly. He brings the light to darkness if you make the darkness open to him. But what you hide, he cannot look upon. He sees for you, and unless you look with him, he cannot see. The vision of Christ is not for him alone, but for him with you. Bring, therefore, all your dark and secret thoughts to him, and look upon them with him. He holds the light, and you the darkness. They cannot coexist when both of you together look on them. His judgment must prevail, and he will give it to you as you join your perception to his. So the Holy Spirit asks of you but this. So that's the somewhat Shakespearean and biblical turn of phrase that's used in the course. But we need to understand Jesus is saying the Holy Spirit asks only this of you. That's what that means. And what he's asking is, join with the Holy Spirit and look at what's happening in your mind and your feelings. In your wrong mind, with its thoughts and feelings. The mind that thinks it's a body. The mind that thinks it can be attacked and attacked. And the feelings that are going to come up, which is your guilt rising. And Jesus says, do one thing. Let me be with you in your mind, and let's look at them together. So this idea then of looking with Jesus, it's obviously not a normal looking. To be with Jesus in this way, it has to be a non-judgmental looking. It has to be a witnessing. It has to be a noticing. No opinions, No decision that it's good or bad or right or wrong, or I shouldn't be having these feelings. No. Witnessing. That's what it means to be non-judgmental. As Ken would always say, forgiveness is looking at the ego without judging it. And so all you want to do is get in touch with this witness that you are, that you always are. This is why enlightenment is but a recognition and not a change at all, as Jesus says. You are always the witness. You're always noticing. You are the noticer. You're just not noticing the noticer. You're lost in the thoughts and feelings. You're spiritually unconscious in them. And so the realization is that you are not the voice in your head. You are the one that hears it. Who is the one that's aware of these thoughts happening? Who is the one that's aware of these feelings coming up? That's the you that's always in the cinema with Jesus. So we do eventually want to move away from the idea that I want to now go to the cinema with Jesus. We want to understand we're always in the cinema with Jesus. The noticer is always in the cinema with Jesus. The one who hears the voice in your head is always in the cinema with Jesus. That's your right mind. And you want to put all your attention on noticing that noticer for the rest of your life. Because that's what Jesus means when he says, his judgment must prevail, and he will give it to you as you join your perception to his. That's his perception. Non-judgment. Noticing. And that's what you are when you're in your right mind. You're the noticer of the world, not its judge. And you're the noticer of what your wrong mind's doing with that. You're aware of your guilt coming up and getting projected out onto the world and the temptation to say, you did this to me. And so really, Jesus is asking us, do one thing. Or the Holy Spirit asks, but this one thing alone. Open all your thoughts and feelings up to me. Let's watch them together with no judgment of them. In no place does he say, fight those emotions, feel guilty about those emotions, try to change those emotions, try and turn those bad thoughts into good thoughts. That's not there in the passage at all. Let me look at them with you, which is important. Unless you look, he cannot see. Sometimes people think, oh, I'll just give that over to the Holy Spirit. Check back later. See if my guilt is undone. And that's not what it means to give it over to the Holy Spirit. That's a very worthy and true principle when it comes to your entire life. Give that over to the Holy Spirit. But not forgiveness. Ultimately, Jesus tells us we don't do forgiveness, the Holy Spirit does. Our job is just to bring the darkness to him. But we got to join him first in the light. We can't call him as the light into the darkness. So we have to fall back. So we notice, anger and pain and hurt emerging within us, and we fall back. We fall back to Jesus. And we're the noticer of the pain happening and the thoughts in our mind. And we're not fighting it. We're choosing to be completely okay with what's happening. Our guilt is coming up to get undone. And all we're going to do is not project. Well, we're going to reverse projection. We're going to stop saying, you did this to me. I was a happy little ego. a happy little insane voice talking to itself in my mind until you came along and did that. And you did this to me, you put these feelings in me. We're gonna not do that. We're going to take responsibility for the fact that the world is what is, and it's going to stir up the guilt that's inside of us. And as course students, our job is to undo that guilt. And Jesus has just laid it out there for us in the passage. How do you do that? You fall back to me. And you can only do that by noticing the voice in your head and the feelings that are happening. And that's it, witnessing, noticing. You're not the voice, you are the one who hears it. When you're hearing the voice in your head, you're already with Jesus. So that's our process. And we don't have to worry about undoing the darkness that's coming up or the guilt. All we have to do is step back into the cinema and join our perception to him. Well, the perception with him is, I understand I'm not the thoughts and feelings that are happening. That's the self I made. That's the thoughts that are not my real thoughts. So we begin to identify as what's in the cinema with Jesus and not the movie character. And meditation is a wonderful practice. There's parts of the course where Jesus seems to be less than encouraging around ritual and meditation. However, that shouldn't be understood as Jesus saying, don't do it or it's not helpful. His point is, he wants us doing this during our life. He doesn't want us setting aside 20 minutes on a Wednesday to be with him. What he wants to do, he wants us to be with him, to fall back, to be with him every moment of our life, which we won't do. But what we can do is start noticing when I feel upset and in pain and angry and judgmental and irritated, and I can fall back. And I can watch the movie with Jesus, but I must notice the noticer. You know, the awareness of pain is not in pain. The awareness of sadness is not sad. The noticer of anxiety is not anxious. That doesn't mean there's not anxious there. It's just that, what has it got to do with the noticer of it? In the course, what we're really doing is gradually and gently undoing an identity problem. You are not the insane voice talking to itself in your mind. You are the one that hears it. And each time we fall back into the cinema with Jesus and let our emotions happen without blaming someone for them, we understand this is my guilt coming up. Simply allowing Jesus to look at them with us, they'll vanish. Maybe not straight away. It might take us a while to, and we forgive ourselves until we're ready to do the last part, which is join our perception to him, which means I'm not the body. I'm not the insane voice talking to itself. I'm not the emotions coming up. I am what is with Jesus. My identity is the noticer. This is the me who rests in God, always. I'm always the noticer. I'm not noticing the noticer, though. I split it off. It's dissociated. I'm identified with the insane voice talking to itself in my mind. So that's what I want you to consider in terms of the experience as opposed to the metaphor. So we're going to move forwards with our meditation now. I shall give it over to Teresa to ring her bell in a moment. And just before that, to finish a point that I started, what we should do with these meditation times, this is our training. This is us being in the gym. This is us working on being able to notice the noticer under optimal conditions, which is meditation. But we don't sort of segregate that. We don't wall that off. We don't say, this is my time with Jesus. No. This is your training for your life, where you allow Jesus to look at everything that's happening and every thought and feeling you're having about it. And that's it. He'll do the rest. Fall back. And okay, so let's do our gym session for forgiveness in our daily life. And I'll hand it over to Teresa now.
Open your eyes slowly and come back into the room. We have 10 minutes left for sharing your reflections and your questions. If you'd like to speak, raise your hand or use the reactions button at the bottom of the screen, and I'll invite you to take yourself off of mute. If you'd like to ask Keith a question or comment with confidentiality, put your message in the chat function at the bottom of the screen, and I'll read it out. Norman, take yourself off mute.
Thank you very much indeed, Keith. If I was anywhere near you, I would give you a big monster hug. Probably not let go. No, I just wrote down, how difficult is it to not forgive nothing? And that was my bottom line. I've been tortured all my life with a thought of a 3-year-old child, 2 to 3-year-old child, having an evil impulse. But where did that evil impulse come from? And that was my big mistake. I was looking at a 3-year-old child that wasn't there. The ego thought it was there all right and really played havoc with me all my life. I'm 77 years now. So for 70 odd years, it's been torturing me. And I have been improving immensely, but this was my last bugbear, if you like, the thing that was holding me back from total escape. And it just came. How could you not forgive nothing? And that's more than magic. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you for A Course in Miracles as well.
Kay, would you like to take yourself off of mute?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I just guess I just had a question about, can the mind ever actually be useful? Because as soon as I start, even when I'm in the cinema with Jesus and there's a part of me that starts narrating it. Oh, I see this, I see that. And then it starts to go down a bit of a rabbit hole when I start to chat more, notice more, and then I find I'm back in the identity again. But when the mind is quiet is when I feel most at peace and most in that place with the Holy Spirit. But as soon as my mind starts talking at all, or narrating at all, I tend to lose that. So I'm wondering, with the mind narrating or talking at all, is it ever useful?
You don't want to make your goal to silence the mind, because what we resist persists, and what we fight we fuel. All you ever want to do is, when you notice your mind narrating, just to step back, just to say to yourself, who is the one that's noticing the narration? That will bring you right back. I think that the narrator in our head is absolutely, giving its opinion and its judgments and its verdicts on absolutely everything. So that's like our wrong mind. And in the course, what we want to learn how to do, because ultimately it's about getting to the real world. Ultimately, it's about looking on a forgiven world. Ultimately, it's about, it's the quiet mind that can remember God. And so what we want to do is work towards a place where we can look on the world with a quiet mind. There's no opinion on anything. Jesus talks about that in chapter 2, where he says, who is the you who are living in the world? Spirit is, eternal. And so we're not going to be able to do that. So instead, he's saying to you, until you can watch the dream figures come and go, shift and change, suffer and die, and not be deceived by what you see, until you can do that, step back with them and watch your thoughts coming and going, shifting and changing, suffering and dying, and don't judge it. And so it's really only ever just stepping back. Just who's the one that's noticing the narrator? And that will bring you right back to the cinema. That will bring you right back with Jesus or the Holy Spirit into that space. But you can be in that space when your mind is racing. Once you're the noticer of it. If you start fighting it or trying to change it, then you're not in the cinema anymore, because you've lost your noticing, your simple witnessing. And so when you're in a very difficult situation in life, you know, your adrenaline is going to be up, your heart's going to be beating, you know, your mind's going to be racing. And just who's noticing that happening? That's the you that's with Jesus, and be okay with it happening. You know, we got to be okay with it happening. We're going to let it release inside of us. We're going to let the Holy Spirit take it away from us. And all we've got to do is be okay with it being there and not project it onto the world and say, you did this to me. It's my guilt coming up, so it'll clear. That's our process with the course. That's the journey home. People think it's failure. No, that's the steps that bring you home. Does that make sense?
Yes. So it's sort of all like the meditation. It's all that practice to try to start to silence the mind, but not trying to force that to happen, because it will still keep happening, I guess you're saying, but you'll just start to
don't fight it happening. Don't say it's wrong that it's happening. Don't do anything like that. As long as you just allow, you know, the ego analyzes, the Holy Spirit accepts. So as long as you're accepting what's happening, you're with Jesus. Just don't judge yourself.
Whenever the mind's talking, is that pretty much the ego? Whenever it's talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
have this. So it just, okay, we have our wrong mind, and all the guilt of separateness is in our wrong mind. And then the idea is, let's manage this to be as happy an ego as I can be. And so that falls as the task to the mind, and the mind will go, okay, well, if this was better, I could be happy. And if this wasn't like that, I could be happy. And that's just what the mind's doing. It's just managing guilt. But the idea is to step back into the mind where there's no guilt and witness that with no judgment on it. It's not to fix it. We're not trying to fix our ego. We're learning to identify as that which is aware of the ego.
And I find the ego is quite tricky in that it will start to narrate, like, oh, even spiritually, oh, this is how to do it. This is what I should be doing. And that's where I go down the rabbit warren, because it starts then becoming all complicated.
Just notice the noticer. You just notice the noticer. If you're noticing the noticer of the narration, you're in the cinema. Don't try and do anything else. You're there. Anything you do is going to mess it up. Just go back to noticing the noticer.
Thank you.
Okay, Kirsty, would you like to share?
Thanks, Dan. Hi, Keith. Just talking about this narrator thing that lady was talking about here. When I find it really hard. It just doesn't come naturally to me at all to sit in the cinema with Jesus. I just don't. I have to really try hard. One of the things that I find myself doing is kind of narrating in a way of saying, in a non-judgmental way. So, like, for example, oh, there's an attack thought. That's a judgment. That's a fear thought. And it's that kind of, I don't know if Kay was talking about that, but it's a kind of running narrative of the observations of my thoughts. Would that be ego as well? Or would that be...
No, that's okay. That's okay. Once you don't say that's what's helping, or that's what's important, or that's what's powerful. What's important and helpful and powerful is that was noticed. The attack thought was noticed. Well, who noticed it? And sit in that space as the feelings are clearing. Because that's you, because you've stepped back to Jesus. So don't worry about the narration in that sense. You know, that can be helpful. Just don't make that where the magic is. The fact is, you couldn't have said there's an attack thought unless you were the noticer of it. That's why I want to stress, you're not trying to be a noticer. You're always noticing. You just got to notice the noticer. So don't tie yourself in knots with it. Does that make sense?
It will take a bit more practice, Keith, for me, but I'm getting there.
Who is the one that notices the thought that it's going to take more practice? That's it. You're in the cinema. There's nothing more to it, Kirsty. Don't make it complicated.
Yeah, it's my ego mind is trying to overcomplicate it. That's what it is.
Yeah, but it'll always do that. It'll always do that. Don't try and change that. Notice it. If you're noticing it, you're not the ego mind. You're with Jesus. Okay, so as you notice those thoughts and arguments with yourself in your head, don't try and resolve them. Notice that you're noticing them and notice the noticer. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Keith.
Okay, we have a comment in chat. Is the projector in the cinema the ego?
No, that's all to do with the wrong mind. And we don't want to fight the wrong mind or fix the wrong mind or change the wrong mind or anything like that. And we don't want to fix, we don't want to fix the movie on the screen. What we want to do is we want to step back and we want to be the witness of the wrong mind and its projections. I think what's helpful, okay, on the macrocosm level of things, everything is a projection of our thoughts, right? That's true. But that's not really the level you want to practice the course on. You want to spot your projections in terms of something happens in the world and you decide that's bad, that's evil, that's wrong. Now that's the projection you want to work with, right? That's where Jesus wants us in the trenches with him here. You want to allow the world to be what it is without projecting your guilt onto it so you don't have to look at it in yourself.
Okay, we've come to the end of our time together. Thank you, Keith. That was wonderful. And take yourself off mute and show your appreciation to Keith.
Thank you,
Keith. Bless you. Bless everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Lots